With the big British heatwave finally over, it feels like the British summertime is drawing to a close a little bit. It's finally cool in the flat. I can finally record a video. Yeah, I'm not sweating bullets in my sleep every single day. This might be a big case of recency bias, and where and how I read this book might play a big factor into it. But I think I might have read my favourite book of the year so far. Hi, welcome to my channel, or welcome back, hopefully. I'm Chris. I like reading books, talking about books, and making videos about books. And maybe you do too, and that is exactly why you're here. I set myself a reading goal of reading 25 books in 2026, and I'm currently only 15 books in so far, I think. Maybe I'll go through which I've read this year in like another video if that's something that you're interested in. Some of you have probably read that many books this month already. I'm quite a slow, selective reader. I'm a bit of a mood reader, like, you know, if there's a certain thing that I'm into, I'll probably read a book about that, or if there's a certain place that I am, I'll read a book about that. And it does take me roughly a month to read a book, so to read 2 books a month is quite ambitious for me. But I've been kind of chopping it up with like graphic novels and mangas here and there and stuff to try and like cut into that total a little bit. Plus, there's just so much other stuff out there wrestling for your attention, right? Like, you know, I've been playing a lot of Elden Ring. I'm nearly at the end of Elden Ring now. We've almost finished season 3 of Attack on Titan. I watched The Night of the Seven Kingdoms. What else have I done this month? I went to the Lockswood Joust, which was brilliant as well. And I spent some time in Italy with my partner, which is why I read maybe my favourite book of the year. But anyway, I think my favourite book of the year that I have read so far, apart from The Count of Monte Cristo maybe, has been Patricia Highsmith's The Talented Mr. Ripley. And this book absolutely rips. Let me tell you why. For those who don't know, The Talented Mr. Ripley is written and set in 1950s America and Europe. Talented Mr. Ripley follows Tom Ripley. He's a bit of a drifter. He's got a bit of a strange, questionable background. He's a little bit shady, and he just seems to be moving from like one person to another. He kind of like crashes at different apartments and stuff like that. And we find him sort of in between different people that he's been affiliated with until he's recognized by this rich conglomerate man called Mr. Greenleaf, who tasks him with going to Italy to persuade his son Richard, or also known as Dickie Greenleaf, to come home and join the family business, because Dickie has been gallivanting off in Italy, shunning his responsibilities of being part of the family business, and he's just been living it up in Italy, doing God knows what, basically. So sets off this really entrancing story of Tom Ripley tracking down Dickie Greenleaf in Italy, and sort of getting infatuated with him and his way of life, and he kind of seizes the opportunity to like ascend the class boundaries he's found himself in and kind of join the ranks of these cosmopolitan Americans spending time in Europe, learning the Italian and French language and thinking about art and music and architecture and all these kinds of things. This book's actually been adapted quite a few times over the years as well. I think they've done like radio adaptations of it and stage adaptations, but one of the most popular ones was done in 1999 by Anthony Minghella, if that's how you say his name, starring a young Matt Damon as the talented Mr. Ripley and a young Jude Law as Dickie Greenleaf. It also stars Gwyneth Paltrow and that guy who plays Commodore Norrington in Pirates of the Caribbean, but I always forget his name. I'd be quite comfortable in saying that that film is maybe up there in like one of my favourite films of all time, like maybe like top 20. Like if you forced me to make a top 20 film list, that might actually be up there. One of my favourite YouTube essayists, Bro Deschanel as well, she also did a really good critique of Saltburn and how it borrows a lot of kind of imagery and narrative beats from The Talented Mr. Ripley and kind of pits them against each other, which is really, really worth your time, and I'll put a little screenshot of it here. But anyway, I finally got to read this book whilst I was on holiday in Italy, and man, what a place to read it as well. My partner's actually from there, and so every year we kind of get the opportunity to go to Italy and see her family, meet her friends, but primarily hire a sunbed on a beach and just read a book from start to finish, which is pretty much what I did on this trip. And this book is just extremely worth your time. It's extremely readable. It's at times really hard to put down. There was actually one evening where I was reading this pushing into midnight, way past my bedtime, because there are just some parts of this story where Tom Ripley feels so backed into a corner that you just do not understand how he's going to get out of it or how he's going to manipulate the situation. Prose is also really quite straightforward as well, with a very objective, omniscient third-person narrator kind of telling the story. We get a lot of insight into Tom Ripley's state of mind and his train of thought and how he kind of analyzes situations, which is really quite infectious to read. But it's all kind of presented relatively unambiguously. Like, the film definitely touches upon the kind of queer undertones of the story a bit more, but there's only 1 or 2 sections of this story where the queerness of Tom Ripley comes through. So I kind of appreciated that, how he's just quite a blank canvas, really. Like, we don't really know who Tom Ripley is, and I don't want to spoil anything about the plot if you haven't seen it or read it, but he's just quite a compelling main character. You know, the descriptions of Italy and its people and their activities are so luscious as well. Just to be spending time in Italy on a beach and, you know, running up to your Italian villa to eat pasta at lunch and have an espresso and go out for aperitivo and spend time in Venice and Rome, like, man, you know. And yeah, I kind of have a lot of thoughts about this book as well, like a lot of sort of spoiler-filled thoughts, but I really don't want to ruin the plot for you because it really does benefit from reading and watching this film completely blind, because there's a real beat switch like halfway through the story that I don't really think you see coming at all and feels very, very out of nowhere, but then completely snowballs into this nightmarish scenario of being on the run, pushing your luck, making really questionable decisions, but getting away with it. Yeah, I just couldn't put this book down, really. And I think, you know, when we think about like other big books like, you know, stuff by John Steinbeck or The Count of Monte Cristo, these things are all really impressively written and really deep and kind of make you think about really large themes. And there are really interesting themes in this book of identity, queerness, class, justice and guilt as well, and just kind of borderline personality disorders. But all that stuff aside, it's just a really, really riveting story, and like you feel like you're watching a 1950s drama as well, and I just love that about it. So if you've read this book, please let me know in the comments. If you've seen the film, let me know in the comments. And if you haven't read this, I think drop whatever you're doing and read it. It's super short and you'll get through it really quickly. So this has been one of my favourite books of the year, easy. But I also wanted to talk about some other book stuff really as well. I've kind of been chipping away at some other books. I've also picked up some books recently that I wanted to show you. One of which I literally just finished today is V for Vendetta by Alan Moore and David Lloyd. So far, I've already read Watchmen and From Hell by Alan Moore, so I'm quite familiar with his style and his storytelling and the kind of themes that he always touches upon. I do also remember watching this film when I was maybe like 14 or something, you know, off the back of like being really into The Matrix and the Wachowskis and just watching anything that they'll make and do. I know that they had a hand in like producing and writing the adaptation of this. And so my memory of it was like relatively vague. Like, I obviously remember the iconography of it, I remember the really big beats of it, I remember it being very dystopian, very Children of Men-y, very 1984-y. It feels like quite an honest adaptation of this from memory, really. Like, the plot beats are very similar. You know, it's a very, very dark story. There's a lot of characters. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to follow, but I think the more of Alan Moore I read, the more I'm beginning to understand how sort of seamlessly he blends different scenes together and how he kind of manipulates the format of a graphic novel to really do more than one thing at once as well. Like, I know there's a lot of overlapping scenes in this graphic novel, and even in things like From Hell and Watchmen, where we may be watching one scene but it's being narrated by someone else, or the way it flicks between different scenes is really quite interesting. And then also they just, you know, they do some quite fun bits as well that, you know, if you've read something like Watchmen or From Hell, where we kind of break the format a little bit, that we're kind of reading a sheet of music set to different scenes and to, you know, V singing a song and stuff like that. And I think just little bits like that are really quite smart and postmodern and interesting. And so, yeah, it's maybe not the best I've read by him, but it kind of makes The Watchmen make more sense now that I've read something like this. And I'm really keen to read The Killing Joke, and also maybe Swamp Thing. I don't know anything about Swamp Thing at all, but I really enjoyed this. I read it in maybe about a week, and I'm glad I did, because it also bumped those numbers up on Goodreads. And elsewhere, I've kind of been slowly chipping away at The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck. This is a super short book. I think it's maybe only about 100 pages or so. It's a fictional piece of propaganda that John Steinbeck wrote during World War II, I think maybe before America got involved in the war. It's not blown me away, but like most Steinbeck stuff, it's just good, and it's a good kind of palate cleanser between books. So if you've read The Moon is Down, let me know in the comments. If you've got any thoughts on it, let me know. I'll be really, really interested to hear your perspective on this as well. And then also over the last month, I have actually picked up a small handful of books that I'm really excited about. I think it was maybe last week, I came back from dinner with my friends and I had a really good tiramisu. for dessert, and so it kind of kept me awake most of the night, and I thought, I need to buy some books online. And so I bought Carson McCullers' The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which is a kind of Southern Gothic story. I don't really know too much about this. I just really like the cover of it, and I do like kind of deep South American stories. And this is also written by a woman, which is always, good to add to the list as well. Carson McCullers' prodigious first novel was published to instant acclaim when she was just 23. Set in a small town in the middle of the Deep South, it is the story of John Singer, a lonely deaf mute, and a disparate group of people who are drawn towards his kind, sympathetic nature. The owner of the cafe where Singer eats every day, a young girl desperate to grow up, an angry drunkard, a frustrated black doctor, each pours their heart out to Singer, their silent confidant, and he in turn changes their disenchanted lives in ways they could never imagine. That sounds like a bit of me, doesn't it, really? Doesn't that sound like a bit of me? So, excited to read that one. And then, off the back of reading things like The Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon by Tom Harris, I did sort of put a little bit of a call out of what are some mystery noir crime thrillers that I should read, because I just don't really read enough of that, and I really like that kind of storytelling. And so I've seen 5 Decembers talked about quite a fair bit online, and I think somebody in my comments actually recommended it as well. And it's part of this hard case crime label, but this is one that gets a lot of recommendations from people. December 1941. America teeters on the brink of war, and in Honolulu, Hawaii, police detective Joe McGrady is assigned to investigate a homicide that will change his life forever. Because the trail of murder he uncovers will lead him across the Pacific, far from home and the woman he loves. And though the US doesn't know it yet, a Japanese fleet is already steaming toward Pearl Harbor. This extraordinary novel is so much more than a gripping crime story. It's a story of survival against all odds, of love and loss and the human cost of war. Spanning the entirety of World War II, 5 Decembers is a beautiful, masterful, powerful novel that will live in your memory forever. That sounds good too, doesn't it? I might actually read this book next. I'm not sure. I kind of feel like I need something easy and breezy to read. Stephen King says it's one hell of a good story. So, if the king likes it, then maybe we will too. Excited about that one. And then the penultimate book that I picked up was one that I found in a charity shop in Norwich. I saw Paris 44 in a charity shop for a couple of quid, which I feel like I see this book around a lot. And I think this is actually quite apt to have, considering I'm reading that John Steinbeck book. But I think this is a non-fiction work about the liberation of Paris during World War II, which is a very, very middle-aged book of me to buy. But I think it's just one of those things that, living in England and growing up in England, we don't really get taught much about different countries' perspectives during World War II. We just kind of learn the kind of English and American perspective on these things. We learn a lot about the Blitz. We learn a lot about D-Day and Dunkirk. We learn a lot about how the war ended, but we don't really know about how it affected those European nations in those sort of years, basically. So, I don't know. It's just one that I saw and thought this might be quite interesting to read and I might learn something new. So it's this fresh new account of the liberation packed with revelation tells the story of those heady days of suspense, danger, exhilaration, and vengeance through the eyes of a range of participants reflecting all sides of the conflict: Americans, French and Germans, resistors and collaborators. Among them are famous names such as Ernest Hemingway, J.D. Salinger and Pablo Picasso, but also some fascinating unknowns, including a medic-turned-resistance gunwoman, an androgynous Hungarian sculptor, and a French bluestocking who quietly sat about saving the nation's art treasures from the Nazi looters. Paris 44 looks behind the mythology to tell the real story of the liberation and expose the conflicts and contradictions of France under the occupation, the shame as well as the glory. This gripping wartime narrative will enthrall anyone who has a place for Paris in their hearts. Couple of quid from a charity shop, so that might be an interesting one to read, and maybe it might be quite fun to read alongside some World War II documentaries, or maybe it's time to watch Band of Brothers again or something, because I haven't watched that in a very long time. And then lastly, because I've read The Count of Monte Cristo this year, and I've kind of taken a bit of an interest in reading more classic literature, I've had a lot of people recommend things like Les Miserables. Some people have recommended things like Moby Dick as well. But I have never read any Charles Dickens, and so we did watch Les Mis recently, and I also really want to see it at the West End. And so I bought A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, which feels kind of quite tangential to that sort of topic. So after 18 years as a political prisoner in the Bastille, the aging Dr. Manette is finally released and reunited with his daughter in England. There, the lives of two very different men, Charles Darnay, an exiled French aristocrat, and Sidney Carton, a disreputable but brilliant English lawyer, become enmeshed through their love for Lucy Manette. From the tranquil roads of London, they are drawn against their will to the vengeful, blood-stained streets of Paris at the height of the Reign of Terror, and they soon fall under the lethal shadow of La Guillotine. I've never read any Dickens, so I feel like this might be quite a good place to start, because it's not the thickest either, and it's also not Oliver Twist, which I feel like is the one that everybody starts with, and it's also not... it's not A Muppet's Christmas Carol either, which is also quite a tiny book to read. So I don't know when I'm going to read this. Maybe it's one to save for like the autumn months, but I'm really, really excited to finally read my first Dickens. If you know anything about Dickens, or if you've read any Dickens and you have some recommendations for me, then please let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's kind of it really. It's good to be back. It's good just to sort of yap about books a little bit. Not really in any too deep detail, but enough to be entertaining and that you can enjoy with your morning coffee or something. I think I'm going to try and finish The Moon Is Down. I'm also going to try and get a copy of Berserk Volume 2. And then I think it might have to be 5 Decembers next. You'll also notice that we've actually rearranged our bookshelves. I say we, it's my partner that did it whilst I was away for the day. So we've kind of got a colour-coded bookshelf a little bit. And we've, moved some things to the other side of the room as well. So let me know in the comments what you think of that. And yeah, I hope you've been having a good month wherever you are. I hope you've been having a really nice summer. Let me know in the comments what books you've been reading, and if you've got any recommendations for me as well, or if you've seen any good movies recently. Let's get a good conversation going in there. If you also like what you see here and you're new here, click like, comment, and subscribe. There'll be a lot more of this kind of thing in the future. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye. Bye, 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 bye.